Anti-Semitism in Sweden will pass, and that Jews have an important role to play in a country undergoing profound change.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive. Jews will be resented because of our leading role. Jews will be resented because of our leading role.
And we are saying, yes, we will love our neighbor. Last week, HIAS organized a letter signed by over 1,200 rabbis. Can you imagine getting 1,200 rabbis to agree on one thing? But agree they did, and what they agreed was to ask our elected officials not to halt or even to limit the United States refugee admissions program. And it's not just HIAS. Jewish organizations of all kinds across the spectrum of Judaism are issuing statements in support of refugees. These have included the Orthodox Union, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and so many of the Jewish organizations that you heard are co-sponsors of this event this evening. HIAS works with affiliates throughout the United States, and so many of those affiliates are partnering with local Muslim organizations.
What's right now at the top of the agenda for you from within the JCPA?
There are two issues at the top of our agenda at the very moment. One is the unbelievably important immigration debate in this country, to make sure that immigrants from around the world, particularly those from south of our border, have a chance here. The 12 million or 13 million that just live here and do work and aren't really going home, that they have a chance to stay here justly and as legal immigrants. And that debate is so important because we know what it's like to come to another country, even one called the United States of America, where we weren't always so welcome. But because we were welcomed enough, we were able to create this amazing Jewish civilization and be a part of the American civilization. So we have an entire program called Immigration Nation, and we're trying to make sure that the Jewish community steps up to the plate and the broader interfaith community.
AJC has always worked on the premise that as a minority, our security, our strength, our well-being in America is interdependent with those of other minorities. This is a Jewish issue. It is a Jewish issue to care about those around us, to care about the larger society. It is very much a Jewish issue. We do not live in an island. We do not live in a vacuum, and we need to interact, to connect, to build relationships, and to strengthen the well-being of all of the people in America. It's good for America. Therefore, it's good for the Jews.
The Liberal Democrats will always stand up for a Britain that is open, tolerant and diverse. And in that spirit, I very much welcome the Jewish European Election Manifesto, calling for a strengthening of EU hate crime legislation, stood up for the right of the Jewish community to practice shechita. As a party, we wholeheartedly value the relationship we have with the Jewish community, both in Britain and internationally.
Now, coming back to your question of the clash between the secular post-Christian Europe and the new immigration wave, which is essentially religious, yes, this is exactly what is happening. There is a clash of civilizations. And we, the Jews, we are in the middle of this clash of civilizations.
This is the year of migration and multilateralism. And if it isn't, it should be. Because the world, as we all know, is facing a political crisis, a moral crisis, an economic crisis, and a social crisis, all of which are intimately connected with the issue of migration. Migrants in general, and in every country in Europe, make greater fiscal contributions than they take in benefits. They've lower levels of unemployment, and in general a greater interest in education. They do not, contrary to the current narrative, create terrorist threats in large numbers. The handful of those who have been involved in terrorism in Europe have in general been born and brought up in Europe. Refugees, as defined under the Convention, which defines the legal obligations to them, are people who are escaping from persecution. For centuries, people have escaped or tried to escape from persecution. Some of them failed and ended, for an example, in the Holocaust in the Second World War period, Holocaust in the Second World War period, Holocaust in the Second World War period.
You are chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Immigration. I understand that next week you will be holding hearings on immigration reform. And I understand also that you will be focusing on jobs creation as one of the benefits of immigration. Yes. How will you convince the American people and conservatives that immigrants are not here to take jobs away from Americans?
Well, immigrants throughout the history of America have added jobs. They work hard, they're vital, they create lots of little small businesses that grow into bigger businesses that employ people. And so we are going to have two aspects to our hearing, sort of high-end jobs and low-end jobs. High-end jobs. We're going to have major companies testify that they depend on immigrants. Our high-tech companies depend on immigrants. And so when someone from another country comes here, for instance, and goes to our colleges, goes to our universities, and wants to live here and create something, that'd be great. They should be allowed to. But it's not just the highly educated people who create jobs. Immigrants come, poor as could be, but, you know, immigrants are special. So we intend to change this debate. You know, jobs is the #1 issue in America, in every community, Latino and every other. Immigrants create jobs. They don't take away jobs. They create jobs.
Now, you have written about the contrast between Europe accepting millions of refugees from Eastern Europe after the Second World War, after communism, and now far fewer, but they are not of European stock and they are being rejected. What do you do about it?
Yes. Well, you need a unified European migration policy. You now have 28 different countries with different policies, and some are directly contradictory to each other. And that is, it has created a chaos, and that is what's turning public opinion against the migrants, who are themselves the victims, who deserve help. And instead of that, they are turned into illegal position, and they are desperate, as the situation in Calais demonstrates.
500 or 550 millions of European people, the richest of the world, and we are unable to share with 1 or 2 million in addition? This is untrue. There is no political will, but a political attitude, with nationalism coming back, with racism coming back.
The right honourable gentleman says that he's going to take in 20,000 refugees over 5 years. The Germans took in 10,000 on one day. What kind of comparison is that? I recognise the financial problems. I recognise the assimilation problems. But if we don't do it now, we will live to regret it for the rest of our lives. The message from my constituents in a huge postbag and in every event I attended in my constituency the weekend is, let them in. We'll welcome them. We'll do what the Germans did. Let's get on with it.
I've always believed that Britain is a country of migrants. I'm Jewish. Some of my family came in the late 19th century. I'm Sephardi on my mother's side.
In Germany, isn't the situation there indicative of the rest of the European continent, where we're actually seeing the EU expanding more and more? How do you now see the future of the issue of immigration developing now across the whole of the European continent, based on what you're seeing there in Germany?
This is a very good point, because immigration is the future.
The British model is actually being pushed to its limits now. There's a very high level of ethnic mix in Sweden. I think it stands at about 15%. And people are saying Sweden can't withstand this anymore.
So you have to really make a good policy of immigration all over Europe. You have to really change the policy of immigration inside Europe. This is very important. You have to adapt the educational system and adapt all the self-understanding of the states. They are not anymore only white or only Swedish or only Portuguese or only German. They are multicultural places.
Meine Damen und Herren, ich rufe Sie auf an der Demonstration Schöner Leben ohne Nazis. Vielfalt ist unsere Zukunft, am 6. Juni in Neuruppin um 10 Uhr teilzunehmen. Wir müssen uns gegen die Nazis stellen. Schon aufgrund unserer Geschichte zwischen 1933 und 1945 sind wir verpflichtet, Flüchtlinge anständig zu behandeln. Außerdem muss deren Leben gerettet werden im Mittelmeer. Und es muss einen legalen Weg geben, um in Europa Asyl zu beantragen. Auch Länder wie Polen, sehr katholisch übrigens, müssen bereit sein, Flüchtlinge aufzunehmen. Und dann gibt es ja noch was. Jedes Jahr sterben mehr Deutsche, als geboren werden. Das liegt zum Glück daran, dass die Nazis sich auch nicht besonders vervielfältigen. Und schon deshalb sind wir auf Zuwanderer aus anderen Ländern angewiesen. Bis zum 6. Juni. Tschüss.
But I'm going to channel an old preacher that I admire tremendously, Jeremiah Wright. Yeah. And I'm going to say, God damn white America. God damn white America. White America is a lie. Come on now. I'm sick of the bodies of black and brown people being slaughtered in our streets.
Jeff Hood helped organize the rally in Dallas and was a witness to the police shootings. Thank you for being here tonight. Do you have regret over those incendiary statements? I am not tying the shooters' behavior to them, but you have regret over those now in the wake of what happened?
Yeah, I think obviously if I had to go and do it over again, I think I would have chose different words. These words, were meant to illustrate some of the anger and the rage that was in that space. And a lot of the times when we're in those spaces, there is a need to speak to what is being felt in that space. Obviously, what I was saying was that there needs to be an end to white-controlled America. There needs to be an end to white dominance in America, that we have to come together as one America.
Le Mashiach viendra que quand Édom, l'Europe, la chrétienté sera totalement tombée. Donc je vous pose la question, c'est une bonne nouvelle que l'islam envahisse l'Europe? C'est une excellente nouvelle, ça annonce la venue de Mashiach. Excellente nouvelle.
Quel est l'objectif? Ça va faire parler, mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle. Ce n'est pas un choix, C'est une obligation, c'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement, au risque de nous trouver confrontés à des problèmes considérables. Nous devons changer, alors nous allons changer.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression, sure. The suggestion is that it is somehow possible to separate whiteness from oppression, and it is not. There can be no white race without the phenomenon of white supremacy. If you abolish slavery, you abolish slaveholders. In the same way, if you abolish racial oppression, you do away with whiteness. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity.
Your views are fairly well received in academia.
Yes, they're legitimate, not to say that everyone agrees, but sure. I could not point to any examples where it has provoked political censorship. Whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category. Blackness is an identity that can be plausibly argued. Black studies is the study of a people that has formed itself in resistance to its oppression. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself. And the task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
An Arab man is to appeal his conviction of rape by deception in Israel after having consensual sex with a woman who thought he was a fellow Jew. Sabar Kishore, who denies pretending to be Jewish. An Arab man is to appeal his conviction of rape by deception in Israel after having consensual sex with a woman who thought he was a fellow Jew. Sabar Kishore, who denies pretending to be Jewish, was sentenced to 18 months in jail. But as RT's Paul Leo reports, even couples who knowingly choose to enter into an interfaith relationship are ostracized.
This Jewish Jerusalem suburb is surrounded by Arab neighborhoods. And far from cultivating a culture of tolerance, vigilante-style Jewish patrol groups, calling themselves Fire for Judaism, stand watch outside the local shopping mall. Their mission? To prevent Arab men mixing with local Jewish girls. The municipality has created a 24-hour hotline where parents and friends can phone to rat on Jewish girls breaking this taboo. A specially trained team of counselors and psychologists is on standby to rescue them.
It's important to safeguard our traditions, culture, history and identity, because without this, who are we? From my experience, I can say that the chances for a healthy relationship between an Israeli Jewish woman and an Arab man are very, very low. It's because of the great differences between these two cultures. It's important to safeguard our traditions, culture, history and identity, because without this, who are we? From my experience, I can say that the chances for a healthy relationship between an Israeli Jewish woman and an Arab man are very, very low. It's because of the great differences between these two cultures.